Welcome back to the deep dive. Ever feel held back by your past or maybe worrying what others think?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, today we're going deep into Adlerian psychology.
Interesting stuff
Says we can choose happiness, like right now.
right now.
No matter what happened before, our guide is the courage to be disliked. It's written like a conversation.
Oh, cool. So it's between this young guy, right?
Yeah, a young guy and a philosopher. Makes it a really fun read.
I bet. And one thing that grabs you right away, Adlerian psychology, it totally rejects the whole idea that past traumas define us.
Okay, wait. So not denying those things happen.
No, not at all. It's more like we're not stuck with them forever. Adler thought we're driven by what we want now, our goals and desires, not by stuff from the past. They call it teleology.
Okay, so instead of saying I'm this way because of what happened, it's more, okay, that happened, but what do I want now?
Exactly. There's this awesome analogy in the book, compares past trauma to well water. The water's the same temperature all year, but it feels warmer in winter, cooler in summer, just based on, well, how we feel at that moment.
Wow. Yeah, that really makes it clear. It's all about perspective. How does this teleology thing play out in everyday life?
Well, it leads to another big idea. All problems are, at their core, relationship problems.
Hold on. All problems. Really? That seems like a lot.
It does, right?
Hmm.
Makes you think.
Mm-hmm.
It's not saying other stuff doesn't matter, like health problems, money troubles, but it's saying how we get along with people affects everything, even things that seem like totally internal.
Like you mean self-esteem.
Exactly. The book talks about feeling inferior. Often that comes from comparing ourselves to others, which is a social thing, right?
Makes sense. So our inner world, even that is shaped by how we interact with people.
You got it. What about you, thinking about this? Where do you feel like your relationships are adding joy? And where they may be holding you back a little?
Ooh, good questions for everyone to think about. It makes me think about conflict. Do I avoid it to be liked, or do I try to be honest, even if it makes things a bit awkward? Which, hey, that brings us to the title. The courage to be disliked. Sounds kind of radical, right?
Definitely grabs your attention. But it's not about being a jerk. It's realizing true freedom comes from not needing everyone to like us all the time.
So setting boundaries, being true to yourself, even if some people aren't thrilled about it.
Exactly. There's this story about the philosopher. He chose a path where some people wouldn't like him, so he could stick to his values. We can't please everyone. It's just not possible.
And trying to, that'll make us unhappy in the end. Yeah, I got to work on that.
We're all on that journey, I think. Which brings us to a really practical tool, the separation of tasks.
Ooh, I like tools. Tell me more.
It's asking, whose problem is this, really? It's not being cold or ignoring people, but knowing we only control our stuff. Thoughts, feelings, actions. Can't control other people, shouldn't even try.
So being responsible for ourselves without taking on everyone else's baggage.
Exactly. And by doing that, we can actually be more helpful to those around us because we're not getting tangled up in their stuff.
It's like that example in the book, a kid struggling with schoolwork. Kid's job is to study. Parents' job is to manage their own anxiety about the grades.
Right. That's intervention versus support. Help without taking over.
Makes sense, like being there for a friend going through a breakup, but not trying to fix their relationship or feel their sadness myself.
Exactly. So think about this separation of tasks. Where could you use it? What situation comes to mind?
Good question. Definitely something I'll be pondering. Now, this next one is a real mind shift. Horizontal relationships. It's challenging those typical power dynamics we see all over: boss-employee, parent-child,
Yeah, all those.
teacher-student, you name it.
What's interesting is Adlerian psychology suggests we go into all relationships with that sense of equality, respect, no matter those roles.
So not erasing the roles, but being equals within them.
Exactly. Seeing that worth in every person, regardless of their position.
Like in the book, they talk about praise versus encouragement. Praise often comes from a higher up judging.
Right, but encouragement is acknowledging effort. Like we're on the same level. Thank you can mean more than good job sometimes.
And this applies everywhere, right? Like a boss, instead of praising or criticizing, they could focus on teamwork, shared goals.
Exactly. So for you, where could you shift to this horizontal approach? What would it look like to truly see others as equals?
Another one I'll be reflecting on. Okay, this next one is about self-worth, Adlerian style, the feeling of contribution.
Adler believed feeling worthy comes from knowing we're adding to something bigger, to our community.
Not about saving the world, right? Just everyday acts of kindness, connecting with others.
Right, helping a neighbor, volunteering, even just listening to a friend, being useful to others.
But the book also says workaholism can actually be the opposite of true contribution.
Right. It can be a way of avoiding real connection, seeking validation through being busy.
So it's not about what we do, but why we do it. Genuine wanting to help, not just looking good.
You got it. And that brings us to something interesting. Adlerian psychology says we don't need to wait to be happy. No waiting for some future moment.
Yeah, it's like we put off enjoying life until we get that thing, that achievement, but what if it never happens, or it's not what we thought it would be?
Exactly. Adlerian psychology says find fulfillment in the present, in the journey itself.
Like the analogy in the book, The Dance. It's not just reaching the final pose, it's enjoying every step along the way.
Beautifully put. And for you, what would it mean to embrace this moment right now? What's the joy in your dance? What are you maybe overlooking?
Beautiful way to think about it. I need to slow down, appreciate the little things more. Instead of always striving, what if I focused on finding joy in simple things? Like a good cup of coffee, a walk in nature.
I like it. And, this present moment joy, it ties into another idea, overcoming that feeling of not being good enough, that inferiority.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah.
So what's the Adlerian approach to that?
Well, the book says everyone feels inferior sometimes. It's part of being human. But what matters is how we react to that feeling.
So not about eliminating it completely.
Not at all. In fact, a healthy dose of inferiority, it can push us to grow, learn, improve.
So how do we know if it's healthy, or what they call the inferiority complex? That sounds less helpful.
The difference is how we see those feelings. Say you're learning a new skill, like playing an instrument. You're going to feel a bit inferior to people who've been doing it longer.
Oh yeah, like starting guitar, feeling like you've got sausages for fingers.
Exactly. But if that makes you practice, get better. That's healthy.
But if it makes you want to quit or compare yourself and feel bad, that's the complex.
Right. The book stresses that it's all in your head, that feeling of not being good enough. It's not about what you actually lack, but how you see yourself compared to others.
So it's coming from inside us, not from the outside world.
Exactly. And this is where teleology comes back in. If we're looking ahead at our goals, we're less likely to get stuck in those not good enough feelings.
So instead of what we lack, focus on what we want and take steps to get there.
Exactly. And the book has some really helpful tools for doing just that. One we talked about earlier, separating tasks.
Right. So not trying to change things we can't control, like what other people think, but focusing on our own actions and our own view of things.
That's it. Control what you can control, that's the idea. Like that example in the book, a student not getting into their top choice university. Instead of feeling like a failure, focus on making the best of where they are. See it as a new opportunity, not a second best option. And that ties into another big point. Life isn't a competition.
Oh, man, that's a tough one. It's so easy to compare yourself, feel like you're falling behind.
It's a trap. But Adlerian psychology says we don't need to compete to be happy. It's enough to be the best version of yourself.
So no more measuring ourselves against everyone else.
Exactly. Like in the book, they have a runner focused on beating their own best time, not winning the race. Still aiming high, but on their own terms, not for someone else's approval.
I like that shift. Not better than everyone else, but better than you were yesterday.
Exactly. And this brings us back to that feeling of contribution.
Right, we were talking about how helping others boosts our self-worth.
And that's a big part of overcoming those not good enough feelings. When we're making a difference, we see ourselves as valuable members of the community.
So focus on what we have to offer, not what we lack.
Exactly. And remember, it doesn't have to be huge. Helping a neighbor, volunteering, just being a good listener.
Even little acts of kindness count.
Absolutely. And the book really stresses this true contribution comes from accepting yourself, not needing someone to pat you on the back for it.
So not about impressing people, but just doing what's right because it feels right.
That's it. And it brings us to something interesting about workaholism.
You mentioned that earlier, and it seems counterintuitive. Isn't working hard like the ultimate contribution?
Could be, but the book says a lot of workaholics, they're actually using work to avoid stuff, their insecurities, their personal lives. They might be successful, but not fulfilled.
So busy, but not truly contributing in a way that brings joy.
Right. The book asks us to check our motives. Why are we working so hard? Passion. Or proving something.
Or maybe avoiding something.
Good point. Honesty with ourselves is key. And if the work isn't joyful, if it's stressing us out, hurting our relationships, maybe time to rethink things.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. True contribution comes from balance, knowing yourself.
You got it. And finding that sweet spot, helping the world in a way that feels right without burning ourselves out or neglecting the people we care about. And finding that sweet spot, helping the world in a way that feels right without burning ourselves out or neglecting the people we care about.
Okay, that's a really great point. And this whole idea of finding that sweet spot, it reminds me of something else the book talks about. The idea of finding our place of refuge.
Oh, yes, that's a good one.
So it's about finding those places where we feel truly safe, accepted, like we can be ourselves without judgment.
Exactly. It could be our home, our community, a hobby we love.
Or even our workplace, right? If it's a place where we feel that sense of belonging. The book says having that place of refuge is so important for our well-being.
It really is. It gives us that sense of purpose. Helps us face challenges better with more, resilience.
Now, I'm wondering if there's a connection between this place of refuge and the whole courage to be disliked thing. It seems like they both have to do with finding those people who really get us.
Ooh, I like that connection. You're onto something there. When we feel like we truly belong, that we're loved for who we are, we don't need everyone else's approval as much.
We're less worried about what people think, less afraid of those who don't get us.
Right. And that frees us up to be more authentic, even if it ruffles some feathers along the way.
I love that. But I'm sure some people are listening right now thinking, wait, but I don't have that place of refuge. They don't feel like they belong anywhere.
That's a real feeling, and the book acknowledges that it can take time to find that place. But it encourages us to keep searching, keep exploring. There are communities out there for everyone, even those who feel like they don't fit in anywhere else.
And that might mean stepping outside our comfort zones, trying new things, meeting new people.
Exactly. Sometimes we stumble upon those amazing connections when we least expect it, but we have to be open to the possibility.
So being open to new experiences, saying yes to things that scare us a little, reaching out to people who share our interests.
That's the spirit. And being patient with ourselves, too. We might not find it right away, but it's out there. That place, those people, where we can truly be ourselves.
I love that. And I think that ties into something else that can really hold us back. That excessive self-consciousness, that constant worrying about what others are thinking.
Oh, yeah, that could be crippling.
It's like we're so afraid of being judged that we end up censoring ourselves, holding back from really living.
The book says that excessive self-consciousness, it often comes from that deep-down fear of being disliked.
So we're so worried about what others will think that we end up hiding who we really are.
Exactly. And the book encourages us to remember we can't control what other people think.
Again, that separation of tasks idea, right?
Their thoughts are their business, not ours.
So let go of that need for approval and embrace the freedom of just being ourselves, even if some people don't love it.
That's the idea. And it's not about being rude or anything. It's just being real. Owning our own thoughts and feelings.
Right. But that can feel scary for a lot of people, letting go of that need for approval. Where do we even start?
Well, the book suggests starting small, just noticing when we're seeking approval. Those moments when we're trying too hard to impress someone or holding back from saying what we really think.
So just becoming aware of those patterns, those habits of people-pleasing.
Exactly. Once we see it, we can start to change it.
Okay, so awareness is the first step. What else can we do to let go of that need for approval?
The book says try shifting your focus. Instead of worrying what others think of you, think about how you can help them.
So it takes the pressure off of us, right?
And it reminds us that we're not alone, that everyone has their own struggles. We're all in this together.
And our worth isn't tied to whether people like us or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're valuable just because we're human, part of this big, messy, beautiful thing called life.
I love that. And I think that mindfulness thing we were talking about earlier can really help with this too.
It's such a powerful tool.
Yeah.
Especially for dealing with that fear of judgment.
Right. So if we feel that anxiety creeping in, that, oh no, what will they think of me? Feeling, we can just notice it without judgment, without letting it control us.
Exactly. It's like creating space between us and those thoughts and feelings so we can choose how to react, not just get swept away.
So instead of reacting out of fear or insecurity, we can pause, take a breath, and then decide how we want to show up in that moment.
You got it. That little pause, that moment of mindfulness can make all the difference.
I love that. It's about recognizing those fears without letting them run the show.
Right. Our worth doesn't come from other people's opinions. It comes from within.
And we can cultivate that worth through self-acceptance, through contributing to the world, through living in alignment with our values.
Beautifully said.
No.
And it's something that each of us has the power to do.
So powerful. And it makes me think about how even when we feel lost or unsure of ourselves, we can still take action. We can still move forward with intention and purpose.
Absolutely. And sometimes those small steps, those little acts of courage, can lead to the biggest transformations.
So it's not about having all the answers or figuring everything out before we start. It's about taking that first step, then the next, and trusting the process.
And being willing to make mistakes along the way. Because those mistakes, those stumbles, they're often our greatest teachers.
They show us what works, what doesn't work, and they help us to refine our approach.
And they remind us that we're human, that we're all learning and growing, and that it's okay to not have it all figured out.
I love that. It's about embracing the journey with all its imperfections.
And it's about having compassion for ourselves when we stumble.
Right. It's not about beating ourselves up when we make mistakes. It's about learning from them and moving forward with more wisdom and understanding.
And that's a process that can continue throughout our entire lives. There's always room for growth, for change, for becoming more of who we truly are.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of self-awareness, of separating tasks, of building horizontal relationships, and of finding our place of refuge. Are there any other key takeaways from the book that you think are essential for cultivating the courage to be disliked?
One thing that the book really stresses is the importance of living in the here and now.
Being present. I think a lot of people struggle with that. It's so easy to get caught up in the past or worry about the future.
It's a constant battle. But the book says we waste so much energy on things we can't control. The past is gone. The future hasn't happened yet.
The only moment we have power over is this one, right now.
Exactly. And when we learn to embrace this moment, we open ourselves up to so much peace and joy.
The book uses that great analogy of the tightrope walker. If they focus on the past or future, they'll lose their balance and fall.
That's a good one.
It's only by focusing on the present, on each step as they take it, that they can stay balanced and make progress.
And isn't that true for all of us?
Totally. But I know some people might be thinking, that's easier said than done. I have a million things to worry about. I can't just ignore the past and future.
And the book acknowledges that. Planning for the future, it's important. Paying bills, setting goals, all of that.
But the key is not letting those plans consume us, not letting them steal our joy in the present moment.
Right. It's about finding that balance. They use the analogy of a gardener. They plant seeds for the future, but they also tend to the garden in the present, enjoying the flowers that are blooming right now.
So it's not one or the other, planning or enjoying. It's both. Striving for the future while appreciating the present.
Beautifully said. What about you? How does this idea of letting go of control, surrendering to the present moment, how does that resonate with you? Any connections to this whole courage to be disliked idea?
Ooh, good question. I think you're right, there is a connection. When we let go of trying to control everything, embrace the present, we worry less about what others think, less afraid of messing up, of being judged.
I like that. It's like they go together, being present and having that courage. They both need us to loosen our grip a little, trust that things will unfold as they should.
And in that letting go, we find more freedom, more authenticity.
I think so. And this brings us back to that energial life we talked about before.
Right, remind me again about that, the difference between kinetic and energial.
Kinetic is all about the goal, the destination, like climbing a mountain, all about getting to the top. Everything before that is just, well, getting there.
So it's, I'll be happy when I achieve X, when I get Y, when I find Z.
Exactly. But the problem is, it delays happiness. It says our happiness depends on something outside of us.
And what if we never get there? Or we get there and it's not what we thought it would be?
That's the danger. And that's where Energio comes in. It says, find fulfillment in the journey itself, not just the destination.
So not getting somewhere, but enjoying the ride.
You got it. The book uses a dancer as an example. If they're just focused on the final pose, the whole dance is just a bunch of steps to get there.
But if they can enjoy each movement, the flow of it all, then every moment is fulfilling.
Yes. And that's how it is with life, too. If we can find ways to enjoy the process of living, learning, growing, connecting, then happiness isn't tied to some external achievement.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. But for some people, this might sound a little, I don't know, abstract. How do we actually do that? Find joy in the everyday stuff?
Good question. The book gives some practical advice. One thing is that mindfulness practice we talked about.
Mindfulness again. It really is a key piece here.
It is.
Yeah.
And it helps us manage those difficult emotions, too. When we're mindful, we can just observe those feelings without judgment, without letting them take over.
So instead of I'm so angry or I'm so sad, it's okay, there's anger or I'm feeling sadness in my body.
Exactly. It creates space between you and the emotion so it doesn't consume you.
Okay, that makes sense. Any other tips for managing those tough emotions?
Focus on your breath. When you feel overwhelmed, a few deep breaths can calm your whole system, bring you back to the present.
Like an anchor.
Exactly. And it works anytime, anywhere. No special training needed.
I like that. Simple but powerful. We can all do that.
Right. And remember, managing emotions is a journey, not a destination. We'll have moments where we get swept away, and that's okay. It's about progress, not perfection. Keep practicing those tools. Find what helps you feel grounded.
So be kind to ourselves, even when we're struggling.
Absolutely. And those struggles, they're often where the biggest growth happens.
Okay, I love that. It's about self-compassion, resilience, knowing we're all in this together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes those struggles are too much to handle alone. That's where asking for help comes in. Therapists, counselors, support groups, friends, family.
It's okay to reach out.
More than okay. It's a sign of strength. Knowing you need support, that's brave. And the book reminds us we're not alone. There are people who care, who want to help.
That community feeling again, right?
Yes. Feeling connected to others, that makes it easier to face the tough stuff.
Because you're not alone. You've got people in your corner.
Exactly. And it's not just about receiving support, it's about giving it too.
Mm-hmm.
We all have something to offer, and helping each other that makes the community stronger.
I love that. We're all interconnected, supporting each other, creating a more loving world.
That's the vision. And in that spirit, we can find that courage to be disliked, the courage to be ourselves, to embrace this whole journey, ups and downs and all.
Beautiful. So inspiring. Are there any other things the book highlights, things that are really key to developing that courage?
They talk about overcoming that excessive self-consciousness we were discussing earlier.
Oh, yeah, that constant worry about what others think, it can be so paralyzing.
And the book says it often comes from, you guessed it, that fear of being disliked.
So worried about judgment that we end up hiding who we really are.
Exactly. Afraid to take risks, speak our minds, chase our dreams, because what if people judge us?
And that keeps us from reaching our full potential, from really living.
Exactly. So the book says, challenge that fear. Remember, you can't control what others think.
Separation of tasks. Again.
There it is.
Well,
We can't make everyone like us, and that's okay. Being true to ourselves, that's what matters.
so it's choosing authenticity over approval, even if it makes some people unhappy.
You got it. And it's not about being mean, just about honoring our own truth, even if it's different from what others believe.
I get it, but for some people, letting go of that need for approval, that's terrifying. How do we even start?
Start by noticing when you're doing it, seeking approval.
Yeah.
Those moments when you're trying to impress or holding back your true thoughts because of how someone might react.
So become aware of those people-pleasing habits.
Exactly. Awareness is the first step to changing anything.
Okay, so what else can we do to loosen that need for approval?
Shift your focus. Instead of what do they think of me, it's how can I help them?
Takes the pressure off, for sure.
And reminds us, again, we're not alone. Everyone's got their own stuff.
And our worth isn't tied to whether people like us.
Not at all. We all have value just by being human, part of this whole human experience.
I love that. We're all in this together.
And that mindfulness thing, it can be so helpful here too.
Mindfulness, the MVP of this episode. How does it apply to this fear of judgment?
When we're mindful, we can observe those anxious thoughts, those what if they don't like me, worries, without getting totally swept away by them.
So instead of that spiral of anxiety, it's okay, there's that worry again.
Exactly. Create space to choose how we respond instead of just reacting from that place of fear.
Pause, breathe, decide how we want to show up in that moment.
That's it. That little pause, that's where the magic happens.
Okay, mindfulness for the win.
Yeah.
Recognizing those fears without letting them control us.
Right. Our worth isn't about what other people think. It's something deeper, something we build through self-acceptance, contribution, living authentically.
Love that. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of really powerful stuff today. I'm feeling inspired. This whole Adlerian approach, it's like a new lens to look at life, relationships, happiness, everything.
I agree. And remember, we've just scratched the surface. Adlerian psychology is a deep well of wisdom.
So if you're intrigued, definitely check out The Courage to be Disliked. It'll challenge your thinking, maybe even change your life.
And this journey, this self-discovery thing, it's ongoing, right? Always more to learn, more to explore, more to become.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it helpful, inspiring, and we'll see you next time for another adventure in the world of ideas.
That's a message that can truly empower us to live more authentic and fulfilling lives.
It really is. And, it makes me think about how all these Adlerian concepts we've been discussing, the courage to be disliked, feeling of contribution, living in the here and now, they all point toward a deeper sense of freedom, of purpose.
I think you're right. Adlerian psychology, it offers a way out of those anxieties and fears that keep us from being our true selves.
It's like it's giving us permission to let go of those external expectations and just embrace our own unique journey.
Exactly. And that journey, it might not always be easy, but it can be incredibly rewarding.
Now, I'm curious, are there any specific challenges, obstacles that people might face when they try to apply these Adlerian principles in their own lives? Because it all sounds great in theory, but real life, it throws curveballs.
Oh, for sure. And one of the biggest hurdles, I think, is overcoming those deep-seated beliefs and habits that we've built up over a lifetime.
You mean like negative self-talk, always seeking approval from others, those kinds of things?
Exactly. Those patterns, they can be tough to break, especially if they've been with us for a long time. But the good news is, Adlerian psychology says we have the power to change.
So it's not about being stuck with who we were yesterday, but recognizing that we can grow, transform.
That's it. And remembering that change, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, effort, willingness to step outside that comfort zone.
So be patient with ourselves, celebrate those small victories.
Absolutely. And be kind to ourselves when we stumble, when we fall back into those old patterns. We're human. We're going to mess up sometimes.
It's not about being perfect. It's about learning and growing from those missteps.
Right. And this brings us back to that idea of energial life. Remember, focusing on the journey, not just the destination.
Yes. So instead of getting discouraged when we don't see results right away, we can find ways to enjoy the process of learning, even if it's messy and imperfect.
Exactly. Shift that focus from perfection to progress. Celebrate those small wins along the way, no matter how small they seem.
Okay, I love that. Self-compassion and perseverance. But are there any practical tips, techniques that people can use to actually overcome those old patterns, those limiting beliefs? Because sometimes it feels like they're so ingrained we don't even know where to start.
I hear that. And one of the most effective tools Adlerian psychology gives us is reframing.
Reframing. Tell me more.
It's about looking at a situation from a new angle, choosing to see it in a more positive, more empowering way. Like, let's say you get really anxious in social situations.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people can relate to that.
Instead of seeing those situations as threats, reframe it as opportunities to connect, to practice your social skills.
So shifting from fear and avoidance to growth and connection.
Exactly. It might not be easy at first, but with practice, we can actually train our brains to see things differently.
Okay, I like that. Any other tips for reframing those negative thoughts?
Ask yourself, what's the evidence for this belief?
So if I'm thinking I'm not good enough or I'm going to fail, ask myself, what proof do I actually have for that?
Right. And often when we really look at it, those beliefs, they're not based on anything real, just old stories we've been telling ourselves.
So challenge those negative scripts, rewrite them with something more positive, more true.
That's the goal. It takes work, but it can lead to big changes.
Okay, this reframing thing, I'm a fan. Turning those old negative stories into something empowering, love it. But we've talked a lot about the individual journey here, but Adlerian psychology, it really emphasizes community, connection, right?
It does. We're social beings. We need each other. Our well-being, it's all tied together.
Right, that community feeling we talked about before, belonging, contribution, being part of something bigger.
Exactly. And that sense of community, it can be a huge support when we're trying to change, trying to grow.
So surrounding ourselves with people who get it, who support us.
Yes. And also finding ways to give back to that community. Because when we feel like we're making a difference, it strengthens that sense of purpose, of belonging.
We're all part of that tapestry, each with our own thread to contribute.
Beautiful analogy. And through those acts of service, we create a stronger, more loving community for everyone.
Okay, that's inspiring. We're not alone. We have the power to make a difference, not just for ourselves, but for others.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to the courage to be disliked. Because when we're living authentically, making a positive impact, well, not everyone's going to love that.
Right, some people might not get it, might not appreciate our efforts.
And that's okay. The book reminds us, trust yourself, keep moving forward, even when you face disapproval. You can't please everyone, and trying to will just make you unhappy.
So it's about honoring our own values while still being respectful of others, even when we disagree.
Finding that balance, it takes practice for sure. But in the end, it's about living with integrity, being true to yourself, even if it ruffles some feathers along the way.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, diving deep into Adlerian psychology. I'm feeling inspired. This is a whole new way of looking at life, relationships, happiness.
Me too. And remember, this is just a taste. There's so much more to explore in Adlerian psychology.
So if you're curious, check out The Courage to be Disliked. It might just change how you see the world.
And this journey of self-discovery never really ends, does it? Always more to learn, more to grow, more to become.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it helpful and inspiring. We'll see you next time for another adventure in the world of ideas.